Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today we have as our special guest Arthur Ballard, Certified Master Athletic Administrator, member of the NIAAA Professional Development Team. Welcome to the podcast, AB.
Good to be here, Mark. Glad to be here.
Let's have you begin by sharing with our audience here in Utah and across the nation where you grew up, where you went to college, your first job, etc.
Yeah, well, I grew up here in little small community in Kentucky, Irvin, Kentucky, Estill County, and was born here, raised here. Went away to college for a few years, but came home quite often, and I'll kind of elaborate on that in a minute. But we played ball here, went to school here, and then eventually started my career here. And so I grew up started playing coach pitch baseball when I was 5 years old in a league that my dad helped coach, and then stayed in that, played baseball, football, basketball all the way up through school, and then as somewhere there along my teenage years, my dad took over running the local little leagues, and he quit coaching and started running that, and I'm sure that's part of the reason why I ended up in athletics. But went to high school, mainly concentrated on baseball and football while I was playing high school, and actually kind of ended up where I'm at today through a few circumstances. When I graduated from high school, I went to Morehead State University as a preferred walk-on on the baseball team because I was going on a academic scholarship, and I was one of those kids that graduated probably a little too young, wasn't quite ready to be a couple hours away from home, and I got myself in a little trouble and ended up transferring back to Eastern Kentucky University after my freshman year, and actually started dating my wife on Christmas break, and that kind of changed my whole life. After serving my suspension at Morehead, I decided not to go back to school there, and transferred to Eastern. And through some circumstances there, besides the fact that my wife was a good influence, my to-be wife was a good influence on my life. My old football coach called me and knew I had moved back to Eastern, and wanted to know if I was going to play ball there. And I said, "No, Coach, I think those days are over. I think I got to get some priorities lined out here, and I need to get an education." And so he asked me, which something you couldn't do today, he asked me to come back to start coming and helping with the football program and help coach defense for his JV team. And that caused me to change my major from a business and accounting major to an education major. And I fell in love with coaching. And so I coached the rest of my remaining years in college, and actually didn't think I was going to get a teaching job, and had gotten married in the winter of December '84, and Carhartt called and offered me a job, and I was still taking some classes. Even though I'd graduated, I was taking some classes to get some more certifications, trying to find a teaching job, and took a job with Carhartt in their manager trainee program, and thought, well, I guess I'm just going to coach a little bit and work at Carhartt. And then the school system called about 9 months later, 8 months later, and offered me a job. And so that's how I got started. I was teaching and coaching, and I've been blessed, been very blessed. Had a lot of good people in my life, and got an opportunity to work with a lot of good people.
So tell me, AB, how did you get from coaching? Then you got into education, you were coaching, teaching, obviously. How did the job of AD open up for you?
Well, it's Mark. It's kind of funny the way things work out. Phil Risen, who is now our the executive director of the NIAAA, he and I grew up together and played ball together. And he was a year behind me in school, and I was teaching and coaching football. And Phil came back home for a couple of years. He had started his career in a different school district, and was and started coaching for was an assistant to his brother, and then went to another district as AD and assistant principal. Anyway, he came back home. I was serving on our site-based council at our school, had been elected to that position, and had kind of gotten into after, with spending a few years on the site base, you start learning a little bit about the administrative side of things. And I was one of them. We went after Phil to bring him back here to coach. And we kind of had a situation. We felt like we needed him. So he came back here to coach for 2 years. And we had an athletic director, one of the best fellows you ever met. But he was mainly a gang manager. And he didn't really know a whole lot about administering. He just showed up, made sure the tickets got sold and the teams got where they were supposed to get, and made sure the custodians showed up afterwards to clean up, and that was pretty much his role. And Phil and I got to talking about the possibility of getting into administration and that kind of thing. And I had finished all my coursework, ready to be an assistant principal, but I wasn't ready. I was ready, but I wasn't ready. And the athletic director announced that he was retiring, and the principal we had at the time talked to me and said, here there's two opportunities. You can either be the head football coach, or you can be the athletic director. And after one more year, he knew he had an assistant principal that was leaving. He said, then I'll make you assistant principal and athletic director. And but he said the district won't let you do both, and that was their policy at the time. And so after a lot of study and prayer and discussion with family and discussion with others, and by this time Phil had moved on. He had went on and took another job, and so it kind of left me there. And I thought, maybe it's time for me to do something different. And I felt like that I could make a difference in our community. I knew how to run. I watched my dad for years run the local little leagues, and I'd been involved in youth programs and stuff in our community as well. And so I decided I wanted to do that. Didn't have any idea what I was really getting into, but I decided to take the athletic director's job and get out of coaching. And so that was my path. I know in some states and in some areas they allow you to do both, but in our community, the superintendent we had at the time didn't want his administrators coaching. So I had to make that decision, and decided to go as the athletic director. And as things turned out, there's probably a few days I thought, what in the heck have I done? It was a whole lot easier coaching football.
Oh yeah,
doing something I knew. But
what year was it? What year was it you started as the AD then?
97. 96, 97 school year was when I was hired to be the athletic director here at Estill County. Again, the school that that I grew up in and played for and coached for and taught for. And then the following year, I was made assistant principal as well.
Let me ask you a follow-up then. Today's job of athletic director, you talked about the early days and the AD that was there before you. Talk to our audience how the job of athletic administrator has changed since you first got the job in 97, and here it is, what, almost 25 years later at least.
Yeah. When I first started, especially here in our area, we were behind the times somewhat, and we were playing the main sports that most of the schools in our area played, but the Title IX wasn't really being paid much attention to. Hadn't been paid much attention to since '75. When they started some girls programs, and nobody was paying attention to how the funding was, how funding was being used, and there wasn't any of that taking place. So one of the major changes for me would have been Title IX, and just a couple of years after I took over as athletic director of the state of Kentucky, under the leadership of then Assistant Commissioner Bridget DeVree, really went to the front of Title IX and became the first state to require Title IX reporting. And that first Title IX report I had to prepare was literally almost a ream of paper thick. Today it takes if you do your work along through the year like you should, today it takes a couple hours to prepare it because all of it's online. Everything's online for you, except your budget stuff. But Title IX, the movement in Title IX has certainly been one of the biggest changes. I think social media, the way we communicate, the way that the ADs today communicate or are able to communicate with their staffs is a major difference. When I first started, you occasionally still got somebody that didn't have a real cell phone. And so you did a lot of stuff by landline, and and the communication with other teams was mostly done by landline using the school phone. So the way we communicate is certainly different. And then there's been so many things over the years that we've seen come into play that I think it certainly is different today, a lot different today than it was in '97. I hear people say, well, the kids have changed, and yeah, somewhat maybe, but I think most of the change we've seen in kids, in my opinion, most of the change we've seen in kids has been because of the adults. The parents are certainly a different entity to deal with today than they were, in the late '90s. So I think that's probably some of the things that I saw the most change. Of course, and one of there's a lot more opportunity out there today. For one thing, with the way news travels today, there's so much, we're aware of so many more things that are going on around us than what we were, and it requires more training. And basically, I could hire somebody in '97 as long as they had first aid and CPR. I could hire them. Well, then coaches education came along, and then, emergency preparedness, and then all those things that went with that, with heat related and concussions, and all those different things that people had to be trained in. So I think there's just, that's some of the things I've seen change.
That's some good insight. Let's talk for a minute, AB, about the mentors you've had in your life that have made a difference for you way back into your youth, your teenage years, and then in your professional years.
Yeah, well, I would have to start with my parents. I was very fortunate to grow up in a good home, and with parents that supported me, but also held my brother and I to high expectations. And my mom was the one that she pushed us at school to make sure we were doing what we needed to do at school, and Dad pushed us at home with work and with athletics. And I tell people, and matter of fact, I told this at my mom and my dad's funeral, because I spoke at both of them, that my mother taught me how to treat people, and my dad taught me how to work. And so they were certainly great role models in my life. And I know my competitiveness came from my dad, because he never let me beat him at anything. When I finally got to where I could beat him in some, he never let me beat him in anything. But they were certainly very important in my life. Some of the mentors, Jim Watkins from here in Kentucky, and Jim, you know him well, and Jim Watkins has been, I got the opportunity this past week at our state conference. We honored Jim for all of his years of service for our state, and for his work with the NIAAA as well. And we honored him and Linda both, and I got to be the one to do that, and to make that presentation. And Jim has been, I tell him, he's my professional daddy. And then he's been my professional daddy since early on. And then after my dad passed away, Jim stepped into a lot of other roles. He's always been there anytime I needed him for support or to run something by him. So Jim Watkins is right there at the top. Phil Rising, Phil and I've been buddies since we were small. But Phil also, he got in the game a little ahead of me, so he was able to point me in the right direction. I know the night I told him I had accepted the athletic director job at Estill County, the first thing he said is, you need to join the Kentucky High School Athletic Directors Association and the NIAAA. And you need to join those, you need to get involved. And so I did. And my very first state conference that I attended, and one of the things that we try to have somebody there now to do the same, but Jim Watkins used to stand at the door of the closing session. And of course, we were a lot smaller back then, but he stood at the door and he shook everybody's hand as they were leaving our state conference. And as he shook mine, I told him, I said, man, this is one of the best conferences I've ever been to, if not the best. And I said, I'd love to get involved. And he said, we can make that happen. And it wasn't but a few weeks, I got a call, and through some recommendations, I got placed on to help with the conference program. And that grew into a position of helping direct the educational opportunities at our conference. And then, becoming a few years ago, then state coordinator, one of our state coordinators. And so Phil Rising, but Jim Watkins, and then I still have mentors today. There's a lot of you guys that I started looking up to years ago. And I want to be able to do that. I want to be a part of that. And and I got the opportunity to get into leadership training because of Jim Watkins and Jim Teff, who is someone else that I hold at the highest level. Jim Teff was so good to me, and they placed me with Lee Green, and what a blessing for my life to get to work. I taught with Lee for 20 years in legal issues. Got to be there to help unveil the Legal Issues 3, and then got to be a part of Legal Issues 4, because he had Peg and all of us doing, we were like paralegals looking up cases and all those kind of things for the different areas in 510. And so Lee also it was another one that was just a great mentor to me, and I'm forever grateful.
Excellent. Let me ask you this. As far as I'm concerned, there's 5 legends in Kentucky. You've mentioned 2 of them, Jim Watkins and Phil Risen. And then, of course, Fay. And then Hugh, who's your current executive director. And then I consider you the 5th, because those are the people I know from Kentucky. Do you have any stories or fond memories of the other 4? I know you've already talked about Phil and Jim, so maybe a couple of stories about Fay or Hugh that you can share with us.
Yeah, well, Fay, I love Fay to death, and Fay was, she was active when I started. When I started with the KHSADA, she was already active in leadership training, and she was serving as the secretary for our board of directors, and we were in the same region together in the state of Kentucky at that time. So Fay, Fay, I used to kid her sometimes about how she could be all professional during the day, but when the work was done, then she wanted to have a good time in the evening. And she's taught untelling how many people in this country how to play left, right, center, and and all the party fouls that go along with that. She just always, as always, was so supportive. And of course, we traveled a lot back in the early days. The Kentucky contingent would all travel. We would all book our flights together to the national conference, and then of course serving with her on the our conference committee for a number of years as well. And of course, she has a lot of health issues now and is unable to attend. And we still miss Fay, having her around. And you mentioned Hugh. I think the world of Hugh McReynolds. Hugh has, he has given so much. Certainly to the NIAAA with his number of, he's still the longest serving committee chair in the history of the NIAAA with the turf committee that he chaired for years and years and years, kept taking extensions. So he helped put that turf conference together every year, and was a big part of that. He's also taught leadership training for a number of years. And then his work that he did at Logan County High School out in Western Kentucky, and just how, he made things so much better for those kids in that area, willing to sacrifice whatever he had to make things better for those kids. But, for our state, Hugh's our executive director, and he works so hard at it and gives so much. And, he's just one of the best fellows, and I know that, but he's one of the best fellows ever was. And got to spend, I was with him all week last week. So that was certainly a blessing as well. It's always good when we get to spend time together. And now we're trying to clean up from last week and get everything finalized. But Yeah, those are great people, and certainly have been a great influence on my life.
Great, great memories. You'll appreciate this, AB. I first met Hugh and Faye, and this has got to be at least 18 years ago, maybe longer. It was the first time Utah attempted a summer LTC summit, and we got Faye out here, we got Hugh out here both. It was taught in downtown Salt Lake, maybe 2003 or 4. And of course, I'd already met Jim by then, hadn't met Phil yet, but that's how long I've known them. And of course, I've known you for years and years. I want you to talk a little bit more about your journey with the Kentucky Association. You mentioned that you obviously became a member of the NIAAA, but talk a little bit more in detail on how you were active in the Kentucky Association and then got involved with the NIAAA. I know you had years and years with Lee, as you said, and then talk about some of the successes you've had from your years of being a coordinator there.
Yeah. The, as I mentioned there a little bit earlier, Jim, if you tell Jim you're willing that you want to be a part of something, and then he offers and you take him up on it, then you never get out of it. you're
True enough.
You're a lifer. Yeah. And so I started out with the KHSADA. At the time, Jim was the conference director for our state conference, and he had someone that he was training that was taking care of working with the vendors. And then he had someone else that was taking care of the program, the workshops. And then, of course, Faye took care of Faye and Jim themselves took care of leadership training. And so when I volunteered to help, I'm sure that Phil was one of the ones that filled Jim in, but I had been helping at our school with professional development for our teachers. I had been the chairperson for our professional development committee for a number of years as a teacher, and so I helped, line up in services and did the surveys and what we needed to work on as a faculty, and worked with my principal on that even before I became assistant principal, and so that was the area. Jim told me, he said, I got this guy that's running our program, but he's, running the professional development, the workshop stuff. And so I want you to work with him. So the first year or so, I kind of just paid attention to what was going on, sat in on the meetings, had some input and whatever. And then the second year I took the workshops, and the other guy was doing the general sessions. And during this changeover, Jim was stepping into a different role, and he had moved Jeff Edwards up to be our conference director, and Phil took over the vendors. And so I'm second in line with the program side, the way we talked about it with workshops and whatever. And so we had several workshops, and I verified all my presenters and all that, and had everybody showed up, and everything was going great. We had a general session that the other guy that was his deal. And there was a mix up, let's just put it that way. He messed something up, and it was somewhat a little bit embarrassing, but this guy he didn't do what he was supposed to do. And when the conference was over, Jim and Jeff Edwards looked at me and said, he's not going to be the program director anymore.
He's not going to be back.
You are. Yeah, he's not going to be back. You are. And so for the next several years, matter of fact, until 2017, when I retired, I booked every workshop and general session speaker. I mean, I had others that helped me, but that was my responsibility for our state conference. And so I did that for all those years. Early on, I took 501 and 502, 504, and 506, and just a few years in, I sat for my CAA exam, and Hugh or Faye and Jim both said, you need to teach, and so I hadn't, so I took 790 and I started teaching some there at the state level, and Jim called Phil and I together and said, hey, we need to expand our legal faculty. Lee Green needs some, we're going to want some help with delivery. And so Jim Teff and I have nominated you two to be on his staff. And, so you need to check with your superintendent, make sure you're eligible, that you're going to be able to go all the time. And that was one I neglected to mention earlier. Kim Shaw became during my second year as AD, Kim Shaw became our superintendent. And so when I went to, was going to go to the conference staff, I had to ask him, and he was like, oh yeah, that's good. You need to be involved. And I'm running for the board of directors. And he said, oh yeah, I want you to, get involved in that state association. And so I went and asked him about the leadership training, about being on the national faculty. And his only question was, he said, when you teach at the national conference every year, is it going to say up there, Arthur Ballard, Estill County Schools? And I said, yes, sir. That'll be one of the slides. And he said, then you go sell our school system all over this country. Go wherever you need to go. But you get out there and have your face associated with Estill County Schools and get out there and do it. And so I started teaching then with Lee, but there at the state level, actually, when I retired, was getting ready to retire, Hugh had taken over as executive director. Phil Risen took over for Jim, and then when Phil went to Indianapolis, Hugh took over as executive director. And Hugh said, I need some help with some of it, because Hugh was the state coordinator at the time. He and Faye had been doing that together, and Faye's health had caused her to have to give it up. And he said, I need some help with this. And I said, yeah, that's right down my alley. I mean, I'll be glad to help with leadership training. And so we kind of share it. I do primarily leadership training, and Hugh does primarily certification, but we piggyback off of each other. We help each other out with that, whichever, if we just step up, do what we need to do. And I guess, we went through the COVID years, and we went 1 year without a conference at all, and then we did a virtual conference, and last year we got to get back together, and at our state conference, our leadership numbers, we had 70 something, and Hugh and I talked, and we gotta step this up a little bit, and it'll take a little while to build some of that back. We set a record this year. Last week we had 152 slots in 12 classes. It was amazing. Amazing. The largest we had ever had before in our state was 92, and we had 152. That's 60 more than what our record had ever been. And so we had a great week. We've trained a bunch of new teachers. And you'll appreciate this one. I had Jim Watkins there as a lead instructor on 501 and 502. Had two instructors with him on 502 that had been out of the loop for a while. So I had him in there to be sure get them back on track. And then he broke in two brand new ones in 501. Jonathan Vincent, another one of our guys from Kentucky, that's a national faculty member, did the same with 503. We had 8 brand new instructors to instruct this time at our conference, and had all but 2 classes had 3 instructors in them. And so we're very tickled right now. We're headed in the right direction, and our board is already asking about, what's our next steps? What can we do next to continue to increase this? So
excellent.
So
that's an excellent job,
we're
AB.
fired up. Yeah,
Good for you. That's we had quite a few in Utah too. I think all the states are seeing that. Let talk quickly about well, I guess it's not that recent anymore, but recent within the last 18 months, with obviously the retirement of Jim and some turnover. You and Joey, I had Joey on the show here maybe 5 months ago, but talk about your new role as the professional development coordinator at the national level, just for a second.
Yeah, well, that came about. You find out how much you were doing when you retire, and it takes several people to fill your job. Well, that's what the NIAAA has found out with Jim retiring, that it's taken several people to do what he had been doing. But I did right before COVID. I did an internship with the NIAAA and got the opportunity to work with Don Bales and Jim Watkins. Joey and I did that together, and spent a year working with them as interns. And then, of course, all the COVID stuff and everything happened. And then when Jim told them that he was going to retire, then they posted those positions. And of course, they added some in other areas as well. But excuse me. But so Joey and I were together when that posting went up. And we looked at each other, and he's like, "Are you going to apply?" And I said, "Yeah." "You going to apply?" "Yeah." So and it worked out till we both got hired, and we both get to work together. My primary role is course reviews and the national conference. We all have different primary roles, and then we have our secondary roles, and then we at times we're all 10 together, and we hash a lot of stuff out that way. But the primary responsibilities for me are course review, which we are in the middle of right now, and then the national conference. One of the things that Jim taught us during our internship was that your national faculty needs to be taken care of, and we want them to be able to come in. They're our top notch. They're the all-star team, and when we bring them in, we want them to be able to walk in that room and not have hindrances to their ability to teach at the highest level. And so that main responsibility falls on me now, and I learned from the best. I'm going to make mistakes. I know I'm going to make mistakes, but they'll be made trying hard. But we make sure that the technology and everything is up and running, and whatever else they need to be able to teach, and then work out of we call it the war room, where we keep everything, and everything's it's in and out all day long. There's stuff in and out of there, and keeping up, because we've not only will we teach possibly 60 leadership training classes in December, but we also cover the majority of the committee meetings for the NIAAA. And making sure they have what they need to be able to work as well, and all of the cohorts, because Daryl has expanded that program, which is super, and just a great thing for our organization. and making sure he has what he needs as well. But that's my primary responsibilities, and I love it. Getting to work with all the different instructors and getting to see what's going on. That's what we do. We're servants, and
Well,
it's another
that
opportunity
is
for me to serve.
that is excellent. Let me just give you a thanks from the people here in Utah, and of course, I speak for people across the country. AB, you and JoJo. I call him JoJo now instead of Joe. You guys are doing an incredible job, and so just an extra special thanks. Before we wrap it up, just give us some quick observations. I say the most recent national conference, but by the time this airs, it will have been 6 months ago. But the conference in Nashville, just one of the highlights from being in Nashville for you.
Well, certainly on my end of things, one of the highlights would be the number of people that we had in our leadership training classes. We set a record, an NIAAA record in December at Nashville. More people, it wasn't only the largest conference, but our leadership training numbers exceeded what we had ever done before by over 300. And that's major. So the leadership training is certainly one of the highlights. And for me, I know I say this all the time, and every time I'm asked about our national conference, one of the highlights for me every year is getting to see in person people that I have become friends with and I have become acquainted with from all over the country. That one time out of the year, we're all there in the same place, and we get to see each other. We get to share a hug, a handshake, and conversation, and just to be able to to see all the different people is always a highlight for me. And then I love our awards banquet. Yeah, and I've been fortunate to be a part of that on different occasions, but not the most fun ones for me are when I'm not on the agenda. When I get to sit back there and watch those other folks, those other men and women that walk across there and get honored for what they're doing to serve kids all across our country. And it just it just tickles me to death. And now I'm getting this opportunity. I'm getting to meet some of those international people, and see how we're growing all around the world now, not just in the United States. So that's probably the highlights for me.
That's perfect. Well said, AB. Let's finish with a couple of questions, AB. The first one being, you've got 2 suggestions for a brand new athletic director. They need to follow AB's suggestions. In order to be a success, what would your 2 suggestions be?
Well, one of them has to be to get in their state organization and get into leadership training. There's so much stuff, so many things that they need that need to be done, and and they need to be able to they need the training so that they're doing it the right way. And and I'm a leadership training guy, and I believe in it wholeheartedly, and I believe that the new athletic directors need to get in there, and they need to work on taking leadership training classes and getting certified. But outside of that, I would say a couple of things with that. One is, don't be afraid to ask for help. The turnover rate today is the highest it's ever been among administrators, and certainly among athletic administrators. We're seeing it in our state level. We had 29 first-time attendees this time at our state conference. Last year, we had 27 first-time attendees, and we're not getting them all there. We're not getting them all. And, so don't be afraid to ask for help, and, hook up with a veteran that you trust And, because I was fortunate, I had several of those around me in surrounding districts that I could call on. And I'm thankful for that. But, don't be afraid to ask for help. Find a good mentor and get involved. I think by being involved at the regional level, the local level, the regional level, and the state level and the national level, all have merit, and they all have different, or they all provide different parts of the puzzle to be able to put your program on the right track.
Well said, AB. Let's finish with this question. What question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
I looked at that one. I don't know. I'm not sure. Some might say, well, how did you certainly had a lot of good people in your life, but how does an old boy from an old country boy from a little town end up as involved as you've been and as what I've been? I quite honestly, I look back a lot of days, and matter of fact, I just told my wife the other day, I said, I've been very blessed in my life, and I've had a lot of opportunities, and still have opportunities that are coming to me, and I don't know what I ever did to deserve it, but I sure am thankful for it, because I have my life has been blessed by all the people that I've been able to interact with, and the people that have become a part of my life, and I'm thankful for that.
Well, that's well said, AB. And I think those last comments you had, I think, are true of so many of us. How did I look at me, and I look at all my friends across the U.S., and so many of them say, well, how did I just started out? But I think some of the keys you talked about, getting involved, having a belief in the association, and I think those are great. So on that note, that wraps it up for this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Again, our special guest today has been Arthur Ballard, Certified Master Athletic Administrator and current member of the Professional Development Academy for the NIAAA. AB, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate you.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.